Good morning, everybody. Today is the 25th of March. It's around 8 in the morning. And I am sitting in front of the Triumph Superbike Storm. This has just been returned from service, the 10-kilometer service, on the 22nd of March. I rode the bike back home roughly in the afternoon, and here is the story of how Triumph in India can kill a brand overnight. So, a brand built over 100 years of engineering just goes up in smoke with Triumph India's expertise. So I rode back from service in the afternoon on the 22nd, and when I reached back home and parked the bike, I was in for a shock. What I'm going to show you is what exactly Triumph India does when it takes your bike for service. Please be careful, and please be aware that Triumph India can return you a ticking time bomb, and it is up to every individual and Triumph rider to take this into consideration and think about his or her own safety. First part of the recipe for disaster introduced and produced by Triumph India. I have taken off the seat, which is quite easy. There are 3 bolts. Here's one, here's the second one, and a third one. We need to remove the speedo casing, which is held by 3 screws, 1, 2 and 3, and the connectors underneath can just be plugged out. The third is to lift the petrol tank away so as to expose the wiring underneath. That comes off just by one simple countersink Allen screw out here, and just be careful to loosen this a bit so as to swing the tank upwards, and that is what has been done out here. So what do we see here? Let me get a bit of light so as to show underneath the tank. It's a bit dark. So what is seen here is a huge amount of wiring, which obviously leads to many parts of the bike, which goes to the front, which goes to the ignition system, to the spark plugs, and so on. Now, as part of the 10K service, there's a need for spark plugs to be examined, and this requires the removal of the entire wiring so as to access the spark plugs, which are actually below this bunch of wiring and the plate that holds the 2 throttle cables, as you can see here. Let me just try and show it in detail. Let me point out with my screwdriver. So here is a plate which holds the 2 throttle cables, and there are about 5 or 6 bundles of wires that come out from this main bunch and go to different paths. There are these 2 connectors that actually lead to wiring towards the front, and then there are cables that lead to the spark plugs and the ignition system. Typically, what needs to be done is to take off this screw, and the one at the back here, so as to take out this plate, undo all the connectors, and expose all the 4 spark plug tops. Once that is exposed, you could access the spark plugs, take them off, and do the necessary checking, cleaning, and gap adjustment if required. Triumph India has gone through the process, and however ended up in producing a ticking time bomb. What has happened here is that all the cabling that needs to be actually coming on top of this PVC base has been pushed underneath onto the block of the engine. And what happens is that as the engine gets hot, the entire cabling starts smoldering and smoking. Let me show you from the base. So here are the set of cables. Here is the right first spark plug. Here is the right second spark plug. You can see the cables to the spark plugs completely touching and pressed against the block. Same is the case with the cable that is going to the first spark plug of the right cylinder. Further, you can see, let me lift this a bit, you can see the bundles of cables again touching the block out here and there. Further, you will find smaller cables pressed right underneath. I wonder if you can see this in the camera. So all these cables, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 below, all need to be above this flange and away from the heat of the engine block. However, what Triumph India has done here, they have done a completely incorrect routing of the cable, thereby producing a huge risk of fire via the melting and burning of these PVC sheets. When I got back home from service, I was shocked to see there was smoke coming from underneath this area, and it smelt of burnt rubber and burnt plastic. I immediately stopped the bike and did a close examination to understand where and what had actually happened. So that is the first part of the ticking time bomb that Triumph India has produced for me. The second part gets even more interesting, of the recipe for disaster. Again, as part of the 10K service, Triumph India has decided that the fuel filters located inside the petrol tank also need to be changed. Now, it's interesting to note that the fuel filter is accessed via this massive flange, which is basically held by about 10 bolts. One needs to open this out and take out the entire fuel filter assembly, which is located in here, and then fit it back. This has been done. However, when I went through the Triumph manual, I was shocked to find out that when this particular flange is opened, it is held by a rubber gasket, which is basically sealing the gasoline inside the tank. And this particular gasket has not been replaced by Triumph India. They have just reused the old gasket. Now, it's very interesting to see the combination that has been given to you by Triumph India. They have produced a perfect ignition system at the base, where anything can catch fire or can spark, and right on top they have given another excellent source for fuel, or for that matter fuel fumes, given that the gasket has not been replaced as is required by Triumph in their manual. So when you put the petrol tank down and possibly fill enough of fuel, there is every chance that the old gasket leaks and you have an ignition system below, and there you go, you've got everything for a huge disaster and for the petrol tank to blow up right in your face. That is how Triumph India kills a brand overnight.